Kyle of KSLSports.com. Now that you know that you have the sixth pick, how does that adjust your planning? You see the five teams in front of you. You kind of had those odds already, but how does that change your planning now that you know who's ahead of you, if you want to move up, down, all of those types of things as well as staying at six?
Yeah, you get excited because now you know exactly where you're picking. So you're kind of now it's going to the scouting meetings and honing in on the players that we like at six. So it's really now just targeting your guys. It's an exciting time of year. Just you've kind of figured out, you've all year you've battled and gone to war with your scouts, going across the world. Working every single night in every hockey rink across North America and Europe, and now it's at the point where they're making decisions, and now we're making decisions on who we're going to take at six. So this is a great time of the year for us as an organization to get together and go through the scouting meetings, go through the combines, and then we end up in Vegas, and it's going to be they've got a lot of talented players up top in the draft, and we got a chance to get one of them.
Ryan Miller, go ahead and ask your question.
Hey Bill, Ryan Miller from KSL.com. I'm just curious, what are your general thoughts on the prospects that will be there around six?
Yeah, I mean, every draft is different. It's kind of interesting. When I was with St. Louis, and we're always picking around 20 to 26, and we're in the same spot every year, and we kind of honed in on that area. Now that we've been going to the rebuild, we've been picking, basically 3 to 6. So we're in that range, and I think the more you pick there, the better you get there. I do believe that, and I think there's a good talent level there. They're young men that are 18, and some of them are still late developers, and you can just see glimpses of who they're going to be. But there's some good talent there. There's some good defensive talent. There's some good offensive players that are there. I like this year's draft, and I know our scouts are excited about where we're picking and the opportunity to pick some of that talent.
Jay Catch.
Bill, Jay Catch from KSL Sports. Just wanted to ask you about the process of evaluating talent. Is this a year-long effort that now kind of like you hone in on guys you may have been evaluating maybe for years at this point?
Yeah, it's a whole process, when you go through this, because it starts the year before when they're 17, they're underages, and you watch them, and then the summer goes by, you watch them in the summer tournaments, and then you see them with their team. You see them on the all-star teams or the prospect teams. Then they go back with their team, and they end up going into playoffs, and some end up going into the U18. So you see them all over the world in these different events. And there's a lot of guys that they at the start of the year they're just okay, but then they in their draft year it's almost like they become men, and they shoot up. And good scouts keep an eye and they keep an open mind as the player moves through it. And sometimes there's even players that we see it all the time where the media hypes them at the start of the year and keeps them there. But for our staff, with our experience, sometimes we're not afraid to, as we did last year, to go out and look at different options. And people are like, hey, I can't believe they're picking those guys. But what they don't understand is, 3 years from now, they always turn to us and go, yeah, you got the right guy. So it's a process. You got to have a lot of trust in your scouts, and we have a tremendous amount of experience on our staff, and they've done a good job for our team that's going through the rebuild and being able to add talent. But it is certainly a process that it's a full year of scouting to understand the whole player.
Ryan McDonald.
Hey Bill, Ryan McDonald from Deseret News. Has the preparation process been different with the relocation? How's that affected things, if at all? What's that been like, adding to the normal evaluation and scouting process?
Our process has stayed the same. I think the thing that's changed, or our scouts are really excited, is they're excited about coming into Salt Lake, seeing the city and getting the vibe of the excitement in this city. And I think that's going to help us as we go through the process. We have our scouting meetings here. The scouts are just pumped to get in and see the building and the dressing room being worked on. And so I think it's going to be a lot of good energy. and our scouts get to see the new city we're playing out of, and the people in Salt Lake and all the people in the state have been just so excited about us coming. Every time we land here, you get a smile on your face because people are just ecstatic about having an NHL team in Salt Lake.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, Bill, I'm curious, how do assets play into the draft? Like, how can you use those to move up, go down? I don't know. What's kind of the process of using those?
Well, I think, you see teams move down and acquire picks to move backwards, and sometimes you use picks. We've used our picks in the past for the geeky pick, where we've bundled a tremendous amount of picks together to move up in the draft, and the team that's pick starved, that maybe has just started their rebuild, they like that because they're going to get a handful of picks instead of just having one. So we always try and look at every single option, where we can move up to, can we move back and get the same player, gain assets. It's a whole strategy in itself, and it consumes you, the week of the draft. It really, we'll talk about some ideas as we move through the process, but the week of the draft, it just consumes you. It's almost like you're not human because you only have one thought, just the entire week is just draft, and it's on. And sometimes there's opportunities to move up, and sometimes there's opportunities to move back. But it comes down to, no matter where you move, you got to get the right player. At the end of the day, you got to get the right player. And sometimes, a lot of the conversations just say, hey, stay in. We've earned the right to pick here. Let's swing from here. So that conversation has a lot, but I can tell you, we talk about it 24/7 in that week. It's crazy how much it consumes us about all the different things that can happen at the draft.
Bill, wanted to ask you, just with regards, a lot of us have an NBA background with the Utah Jazz.
Yeah.
They traditionally bring in a number of prospects for visits ahead of the draft. How does that work in the NHL, and how will it affect you guys not necessarily having a home sheet to have guys maybe be evaluated on right now?
Yeah, it's a great question. The difference is you can bring players in for workouts in the NBA. The difference between the NHL and the NBA is once they're booked in for the NHL Combine, you're not allowed to test them. They're locked in to do the testing at the Combine. Anybody else that wasn't invited, you can bring them into your Combine, and we do that. We're set up with all our metrics and everything that we're doing, and we'll probably do that out of Arizona this year just because we're set up in the rinks there. But we'll move it here next year, and that's an important process to know more about the back end of the draft. And like I always say, you never beat the NHL by 7 goals. You might beat them by just 1 goal and one step ahead of them. And if you can find that out in your combine, or you can find that out through data or more information, you're always digging. You're always, a hungry staff is the best staff, and a staff with knowledge is good. And I like our process that our guys use, and we work on it every day.
Bill, you've talked about how you believe that you build the core of your team through the draft and supplement with all the other avenues. When you look at the amount of picks you have, not only this year but also in the next few seasons, does that impact how you look at this year's draft? Do you look at it in a vacuum, or do you plan hey, this year's draft plus next year's draft before you try and make those moves where you strike while the iron's hot, so to speak?
Yeah, you look at really what you can get at the end of the day. Can you bundle all your picks and move up and get one guy, or can you just use your picks to take swings at 4 or 5 guys? Can you use your picks to go out and buy a player? There's so many different options for us. We go in so many different ways. We try not to look at hey, we got so many picks the following year and the following year. It's year by year, and value those picks. Even though you might have 3 second rounders, value them and make sure you're not giving them away or thinking somewhat of hey, it doesn't matter. We got a ton of these picks. We value all our picks, and we try to be as stingy as we can with our picks and make smart decisions to acquire players or to move up. But it does give us a lot of options in the draft, and I think that's the power of having so many picks, is that if you want to bundle them together from this year or even some next year to move up the ladder to get your guy, you can.
Ryan, go ahead.
Bill, are there any guys, and maybe what's the approach in terms of guys who might be able to come in right away? Does it change from year to year, or is it kind of you think maybe a couple guys might, but most won't? What's the philosophy there of guys who might be able to come in and play right away?
Yeah, I think when you're normally in an NHL draft, I think the top three always have a chance to come in and play. It's also situational. It's also is how good your team is. Like, the one year we had Dylan Gunther who played for us for a small period of the season, but we weren't as deep on our team. Now our team is added more depth and more scoring, so it's harder to make our team. So sometimes it's just easier to send them back to junior, let them play it out there and work their way up eventually. But it really depends on what your team is like. There's some teams, obviously, if you're picking, as one of the top picks, your team's not that good. So there's a good chance that one of the three or one of the five and the top of the draft can come in and play and have impact for you. But they're still young men, and when they sit in front of you in the office, you realize how young they are. But there's usually a good chunk, maybe 3 to 5, that can usually play the first year.
Okay, Andrea, go ahead. Probably our last question here.
I was just curious your initial reaction to seeing 6. I mean, there was a lot of talk that it could be higher, it could be, and when you do see 6, you can only control what you can control, but just your initial reaction to knowing that you officially are in that spot.
Well, I think every organization dreams of moving up and picking at 1, right? So we're all very hopeful that lottery ball's going to bounce our way, and then reality sits in and they flip the card and you're like, oh, okay, well, we didn't move back, Let's pick at 6. We're going to get a real good player. We're picking in the top 10. This is where we're supposed to be, and here we go. So, I think you always dream. Our 2 head scouts, Ryan and Darryl, like to pick at 1 because it can be pretty easy for them. When you're picking at 6, there's a lot more work that goes into it, and you got to hustle and grind on it. But it's definitely reality sets in, and the good news is I tend to look at the positive eyes through it. Hey, we're picking at 6. That's where we finished, and we didn't move back.
Okay, we're going to do one more. Patrick, go ahead.
Hi, Bill. Patrick Kinahan, KSL Sports. I'm wondering how much do you balance best player available versus the specific needs for your team?
Yeah, it's a good question because it's easy when your team's not full of any players, right? And you can just pick whoever you want. I think it changes a little bit to some degree as you start to build out your team. But I've always challenged the scouts to pick the best player because if he's that good, you can always move him for who you want. In my mind, if you try and pick too much positionally, you can really go past some really great players, and then everybody will look back and go, hey, why didn't they take that guy? He got 50 goals because you were so focused on your positional play. And you just have to remember that if that guy's that good and he's going to score 60 goals or 70 goals in the National Hockey League, you're going to be able to trade him for the guy you want. So we try to stick to best player. If it's a tie, then we'll go with the position.
Thank you.